Good morning and welcome back to Nurses Speak. This is Tonya from Nurses Speak, the channel for Black nurses, nurses of color, and open to all nurses. This is your channel where your voice can be heard, and no topic is off limits. So, like, subscribe, and share. And now that I got that out the way, the topic for today is you may have seen a news article about a nurse in Washington. This is the St. Michael Medical Center in Silverdale, Washington. A nurse working in the emergency room was compelled to call 911 to get support for the patients that were being cared for in the emergency room this month. This is October 2022. And I was gonna make a video about that article the very day I read it. And I was just thinking about it for a few days. Like, wow, I'd really like to talk to her or him. I'm not sure if it's male or female, so I digress. I would have liked to talk to that nurse because I have overseen emergency room services when I did work in a hospital and on a night shift. And I will say that it can get very busy, it can get crazy, it can get hectic, things can turn on a dime. You don't know what's going to be coming in through that door. And it was interesting because that facility was also a psychiatric receiving facility. They had a huge inpatient psychiatric division. And so people could be wounded and psychotic or just psychotic. Either way you slice it, it's still it can be a dangerous and very volatile environment under those circumstances. And, this is in the heart of New York City. So, in any case, just to give a little backstory, so the nurse called 911 and she said that, and this is according to the article. This article I'm just summarizing from Becker's Hospital Review website. They send out some information about different healthcare issues. And this one in particular is the follow up article to that, wherein the nurse called 911 to get the assistance from the fire department to send people to help because they only had 5 nurses on staff. The ER was overcrowded and, quote unquote, they were drowning. Okay. And then it goes on to say, I think they had something like 45 patients was mentioned in the original article about this. But this follow up article says that there was a confirmed ransomware attack that shut down electronic health records and canceled appointments and surgeries nationwide. Nationwide. So I'm not sure what that has to do with the emergency room being overflowing and not having enough staff. So excuse me if that sounds a little confusing to you, because it sounds a little confusing to me as well. However, the emergency room director, who's also named in this article, and I'll put a link to this article in the description of the video so you could read the details for yourself. But essentially, this person is no longer with that facility. Hospital official did not confirm whether their departure was voluntary or not. However, this person was the emergency department's interim director since January of this year. Okay. And of course, they already have that person's replacement, who will assume the role of the new emergency room director on November 14th. So, needless to say, life goes on. But getting back to the original scenario, the nurse having to call 911. Now, from my experience, there is a mechanism, or there should be a mechanism called diversion, patient diversion, wherein if a receiving facility is overwhelmed with patients in the emergency room, there is a process in place to allow for those emergency patients to be brought to other neighboring facilities. And there's a process for that that goes through the administration. There needs to be approval. And so it's not something that, particularly a staff nurse could do unilaterally. So I would have to say that this nurse, I'm not sure what protocols were followed, what protocols may have been breached, if any, or what attempts were made to get relief for the staff, to bring in support and reinforcements, and maybe move some staff around within the facility to just handle those non-emergent cases, right? Patients that might have been just fairly stable, waiting to be cleared by, the emergency room physicians, or who were deemed to be patients that would be admitted, right? Because of those that would be admitted would need to be flowed out of the emergency room, to their proper room and bed assignment. And so, you know, is there a walk-in area where nurses, patients could be triaged, and maybe those that are not deemed to be unstable could be managed in a what do you call that? Rapid care area, something of that nature. There's different names for those type of services, but at the same time, and this is the reporting in the article, so I can't really fill in the blanks with what I don't know, but there's a lot missing from that story. And I'd really like to know more about the circumstances. But nevertheless, given the fact that I don't know more and can't say more, the only thing I can say as a nurse, and having seen and witnessed situations where it can be stressful, overwhelming, and even unsafe, there needs to be an administrative response to handle this. It needs to be something that management is zeroing in on and taking urgent action to resolve, right? Because patients are at risk if they can't be adequately cared for in an emergency room. We know that their condition could decline within seconds, and there needs to be an appropriate response. That's not an area where, delays have no consequence, right? Life and death is in the time of response. And if the response is delayed, right, because you don't have enough people there to adequately respond and treat, then, it's a recipe for disaster. Let's face it. So for this nurse to have to call 911 to get help, I can't imagine. I just can't fathom it. That is the epitome of desperation like I've never seen before, and it's sad, right? Because that nurse was calling for help for the patients, help to support the staff that was there that was overwhelmed. And who knows what the mix of those 5 nurses were. Suppose she was working with several nurses that were recent graduates that are working in the emergency room, right? That needed supervision themselves. Let's face it, the emergency room doesn't have a high number of nurses with, expertise as it was back in the day. There's a lot of novice nurses out there in the emergency room that can't handle the pressure. Let's face it. Um, and I'm just being quite frank, right? You need experience to run an emergency room, particularly one that gets very busy, right? You have to be quick. You have to know how to triage. You have to have your eyes everywhere, okay? Because, like I said, anything can happen at any moment. And the article doesn't address, what support staff were in there, patient care techs or nursing assistants or other, therapists, social workers, anything of that you would anticipate would be in an emergency room. Doesn't mention how many physicians were there or anything like that. So the article, it was lacking in key pieces of information. But the 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 focus of it was on the nurse calling 911 to get support. So that's basically what it is. And it's sad. It's quite, I want to say pathetic. I don't want to come across as too negative, but it is what it is. And I'm pretty sure that nurse did not leave unscathed. Okay. Because I'm pretty sure there's a backlash to that event that they're just not talking about yet. And it all depends how they want to handle it, because what's likely to happen is that nurse might be written up and disciplined, or if they're smart, and that's a big if, they'll let it slide and be like, you know what? We're going to support you. We're going to investigate this. We're going to look at what happened. We're going to make sure this never happens again. That would be the ideal response from the administration. Because trust me, eyes are watching. Eyes all over are watching. What will come of this? And I hope there's a follow-up article to that. I hope it's reported. I hope there's some resolution, for the good of all concerned, right? The staff, the patients, and the facility, saving face of their own reputation. Whew, my goodness. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say on that, to bring attention to that, because I feel that's very newsworthy. And like I said, I'm particularly curious what this facility's response is going to be to that situation. So they put a